The views and opinions expressed are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of KTOO Public Media. This program may contain discussions that include terminology or perspectives that reflect different time periods, cultural contexts, or viewpoints that may not align with contemporary standards or expectations.
This is the last stop down, and you can't get any further down than the glory hole. And when you get here, hopefully it's nice, and that you're not criticized for being down.
It's a museum. It's a tribal house. It's a way of showing how the Tlingit people lived.
Once the seedlings get to be about 3 to 4 inches tall and are beginning to look crowded, it's time to transplant them out of these flats into individual containers like this one.
It's rain country time again. Thanks for joining us on our weekly journey through the part of the world we call home. I'm Scott Foster, and this week we take a homey look, beginning with someone who provides assistance to people who don't always have a home that was housed to 7 chiefs, and ways to brighten up your home. So let's begin. There are an estimated 3 million homeless people in the United States. For those who want to offer assistance, that's a pretty big problem to try to get a handle on. A more practical way is to try to help those in one community, like Juneau, where there are 200 to 300 homeless. Bill Noomah likens that to a slogan from the activist days in the 1960s, think globally, act locally. Bill Noomah is the director of the Glory Hole in Juneau.
People come here because they can't make it on their own. They're overcome by cold, they're overcome by hunger, and they have to come in. Hopefully it's a home to people in that these are people that have no home. It's not a place that they'll stay permanently. We serve meals twice a day. We provide temporary shelter. We do advocacy and hospitality. This is the last stop down, and you can't get any further down than the glory hole. And when you get here, hopefully it's nice, and that you're not criticized for being down. But people come from everywhere. We have professionals, people who were professionals, people who were laborers, people who were fishermen, but there are our neighbors.
Bill Noomah grew up in Washington, D.C., a place he calls a very poor city, despite the glitter associated with high politics. His parents were career bureaucrats. When it came time for college, Noomah chose a school for a reason most high school graduates wouldn't.
I went to college in Ohio because I wanted to get out of that very liberal climate. I was steeped in it, and I appreciated it, and I felt very comfortable in it. But I would read public opinion polls, and you would see 68% of the country feeling some way, and I'd never met any people who had felt that way. And I wanted to meet people like that, the real Americans.
Noomah studied history in college, and in light of his current job running the Glory Hole, recently wrote a letter to his alumni association telling them he was just another history major on Skid Road. His brief experience in graduate school illustrated his beliefs and attitudes that continue today.
I had a short sojourn in graduate school in public administration, urban planning, and I really got turned off on it because we were learning how to use formulas to classify people and decide their fate, really, whether they would fit into public housing or whether they are eligible for certain types of assistance. And you made these determinations on mathematical formulas, and it seemed very inhumane to me. And I rebelled against that. And so I dropped out of graduate school in the first semester and joined the Mennonite Voluntary Service and did voluntary work in the Portland, Oregon Skid Road. And I was doing the same type of work that I was being trained to do in graduate school, but I wasn't fitting anyone into a formula. I was dealing with people as human beings.
From the soup kitchen in Portland to fishing in Homer with his new wife. Then, an ad in an Anchorage paper caught his attention. He applied for and was hired as director of the Glory Hole in Juneau.
I'd say maybe 25% of the people we see over and over again. A fraction of that 25% are the real chronic, hardcore street people, the type of people that we tend to stereotype as being people on Skid Road. But they really make up a very small fraction of the people that we see. We see mostly people who want to work, people who are used to working, and people who are very frustrated, very discouraged, and needing some hope, some encouragement. They're success stories, and they're failures. You don't want to take too much pride in your success stories because then you lose your energy. And I don't really like to share them too much, just because it's easy to rest on them and think, oh gosh, we're doing such a great job, when really we don't do very, very much. The people do it themselves. And so I shy away from retelling those things. I wouldn't really claim to take care of needs. I think our mission is really clear, that we feed 2 meals a day. And anything else that we can do beyond that is wonderful. But if that always remains our central focus, and recognizing that as the basic human need, and that if we provide good and nutritious meal and that people are in good health, that they'll be able to take care of their own needs with the support and the encouragement and some of the professional contacts that we have. We've never turned anyone away. We've probably broken some rules in having too many people in the building at any one time, but I'd rather personally get punished for breaking a rule than turning somebody out in the cold or letting someone go hungry. From what I've heard, nearly every community in Southeast could use, what would you say, something like the Glory Hole. If not a food pantry, then just a place where people could be dry during the day. A drop-in center, or some of the larger communities could probably use a soup kitchen. Since the first day that it's opened, we've gotten all of our financial support from church groups and individual supporters. It's unique as an organization because we don't receive any government money. It's people who are friends of the Glory Hole, who have driven by the place every day and know that we're feeding hungry people, and by gosh, every month we get a check for $10, and it kind of dribbles in. It gives the bookkeeper headaches to no end, but every month the money comes in, and so we just know that we do have a base of support.
The Glory Hole is not a fancy establishment, but what would happen if it had twice as much money and twice as much space?
As long as we had heart in our work, I think we'd be busy. There's always that danger that you get too efficient in doing your services, and you can write up fact sheets of all the things that you've accomplished, but you haven't put any heart in your work, and you haven't really given that little bit of real human tenderness to a person that can change a person. Because me walking someone over very methodically over to public assistance and helping them fill out a form doesn't change their lives in any way different than what they could do themselves. But giving someone some encouragement and some real reason for hope might stimulate something inside them which will really just turn their lives around.
The homes of many earlier Southeasterners were located near the mouths of rivers and deltas. A case in point is where the Stikine comes through the mountains and meets the sea near the present city of Wrangell. Through changing Russian, British, and American presence, the one constant home builder in the area were Tlinkits. The house of one of their leaders has been restored. It took place during the 1930s, the late 1930s, under a CCC program. More recently, nearby totem poles have been restored and replicated. The combination of the two is a modern-day reminder of the historic Tlingit presence before the southeast hearth.
The original house on this site was probably built close to the early 1800s, possibly just prior to that. No one's really sure. And it was built here mainly to keep an eye on the Russians. The Russian fort was located just across the way. This house in particular was built about 1939 during the CCC totem project that was done here. So it's built on the original site in the original pit that the first house was built. On the island there's 9 totem poles. Of those, 2 are original totem poles that were done during the CCC project. The remainder are replicas of totem poles that either stood on this island or stood elsewhere in town. The totem project has been a long time goal of many people here in the community. We received a total of $260,000 in state and federal monies to do the restoration project. It incorporates Shakes Island and the totem poles on the tribal house, as well as 4 totems that were standing within the community of Wrangell that were taken down in 1981. And the first phase of the project was the restoration of this house and the duplication of the 4 house posts, and recarving 2 figures on the 2 totems just outside the house, as well as some restoration work on 5 of the totems. And now we're in phase 2, which is duplicating the 4 totems that were taken down in 1981. And the first of those is the Kikseti totem. When we first started the project, we were looking for carvers who were not only highly skilled in carving, but also skilled within replication work. There's a big difference between doing replication work and original totem. With original totem, the carver's allowed to use his style of carving. With replication, you want as close to the original, right down to the same number of adze marks.
The gentleman who carved this one, what was his approach on roughing it out? If we transform this back into a log, what would he do first? Which cuts would he make first? So it's a lot of measuring, and that's pretty time consuming.
We're even getting down to trying to duplicate some of the direction of the adze marks and things as far as the wood will allow, so that we reproduce some of the same feel of that, because those textures and things are just as much a part of individual style as the shapes themselves. It's really pretty interesting, and it forces you to look much more closely than you ever would otherwise. You actually get so far into there that you start to have dreams about it and things like that.
It was kind of nice too to be able to go over and duplicate something that the originals are somewhere around 200 to 250 years old, and duplicate work that was been done that long time ago compared to what I'd been doing prior to the house post, which was all of my own designs, etc., etc. And then to do something that was old like that is really quite an honor. And a lot of the secrets that only wood carvers know, Steve and I have learned off the house posts.
We not only learned a lot about it, but we stand to pass on some of that knowledge and greater understanding of some of the history of the carving before much European contact had taken place. Things that had been collected and from the time the house posts were made, which was before 1800.
Inside the house, we have the 4 house posts that have finally been replaced, the replicas. The house posts are just incredible. Every time I see them, I'm simply amazed. I've forgotten how magnificent they are. And even the originals that they copied from are just really magnificent. The hair on the poles come from hair from Wayne Price, the other carver on the project. When he signed the contract to come to work, he decided not to cut his hair until it was done. So last August, when the house posts were installed in here, he did trim some of his hair off enough to be put on the two house posts. The figure on the bottom of the pole is a bit different than you've seen in most poles. The face above it was not even there on the original. Wayne and Steve had to do a lot of consulting and acquiring photographs of other totems that they felt this particular carver had done, and kind of put a composite together, and that's what they came up with. The original was hacked away during a potlatch at one time. So Chief Shakes was trying to impress a guest into showing that these poles were not that important to him, and that was one way of doing it, is just simply, destroying it. The screen at the back of the house is a replica of a Chilkat blanket that was done by a lady who was a guest at a potlatch given by Chief Shakes, and she enjoyed herself so much that as a thank you, she wove a Chilkat blanket, and it's still in existence. And so when they built the house in the late 30s, they had decided to put the bear screen on the outside of the house, or the design anyway, and needed the screen in the back. So that's what they did. They created this type of screen. The two house posts that come from the Kikseti tribal house, the Sun House, are also located in here. In the original house, that would not have been done, but because this house is also considered a museum, you'll find those house posts. So it's a museum, it's a tribal house, it's a way of showing how the Tlingit people lived.
Depending on the inclination of each winter, our southeast homes may rise from the cleansing base of uncluttered snow, the departure of which, unfortunately, usually leaves behind relics of uncompleted projects and unclean yards. The clean green color of growing plants is one way to lessen the impact of our re-exposed yards, and fortunately, there's an easy way to ease the transition between winter and summer.
One way to get a head start on spring in southeast Alaska is to plant your flower and vegetable seeds. And you start about in February or March. The way to figure out your frost-free date is to call your Weather Bureau. And you need to know that because on the seed packet it will tell you 3 to 4 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks, depending on the variety, is when you plant the seeds, depending on your frost-free date. Find your frost-free date, count back 3 to 4 weeks, and that's when you plant your seeds. There are many reasons to plant seeds rather than buying them. The varieties that you can get through seed catalogs are many times better adapted to our climate in Southeast Alaska, and most of all, it's just fun. You don't need special equipment for planting seeds. What you do need is some kind of a container. You can be very simple. Simply collect this kind of thing over the year, save them up for when you need to plant seeds, or you can use flats that are designed especially for planting seeds. Always make sure if you use your own containers, you poke a hole in the bottom for good drainage. In addition to containers, you will also need your soil mix. And you can use regular potting soil, and that's what this is, or better is the newer type of material. It's soilless, it's peat moss and vermiculite combined, it's lightweight. The main thing to look for when buying any type of soil or soilless mix to plant seeds in is to look for the word sterile on the mix. This prevents fungus damping off disease, which will kill your seedlings. When planting small seeds, start with a flat container like this, and I've used this peat-lite or Jiffy mix. Terra-lite is another name for it. There's lots of brand names. And when using small seeds such as this Viscaria, which is a very nice little annual, and again these seeds are very tiny, you want to just take a couple, pinch some seeds between your fingers and just very lightly scatter them on there. Most seed packets will give you 200, upwards sometimes of 1,000 little tiny seeds. No one needs to plant 200 or 1,000 Viscaria. If you have 20 Viscaria, that's all you need. So don't plant the seeds so thickly that they're going to be crowded. If you're planting something like nasturtiums or some of the vegetable seeds which are larger, start with a container that has individual compartments, because then you don't have to transplant. You cut a step out for yourself and you save yourself some work. Just press the seed down in there and cover it with about twice the depth of the seed in this soil mix like that. With this very fine seed, you now need to cover it, and what I would do, rather than try to put damp seed mix over the top, is just take the dry mix, sprinkle it on there lightly, just enough to cover the seeds, and then with a spray bottle, moisten the top very gently. Seeds, depending on what variety of seeds you're growing, they have different requirements. Some want to be light, some want darkness so they germinate, some want to be cool, some want to be warm. The main thing is to keep them moist. Never let seeds dry out. The easiest way to do that is just slip them into a plastic bag, and then on your seed packet, again, it will tell you what the requirements are for each type of seed. Label your seeds so you don't forget what's in what container, which is very easy to do, and also mark down whether they want it dark, in which case put a sheet of plastic or a newspaper over the top, or if they want it light, in which case you need to make sure that light, not bright light, but just daylight is getting in there to stimulate germination. Okay, once the seeds are planted, we now want them to germinate, and most seeds require a warm spot for germination, and you can find warm places all around your house, on top of the refrigerator, in a gas oven. If the pilot light is left on, just leave the door ajar and set the seedlings in there, the seeds in there. Build a little structure over a radiator that will allow the plants to be suspended above that so they get a gentle heat. You want it to be anywhere from 70 to 85 degrees, depending again on what it tells you on the seed packet. Once the seeds are germinated and you start to see the plants, you want to pull them out of that plastic bag right away and get them under strong light. And if you have a sunny window, that's as good a place as any, but you must be very careful not to let these little seedlings dry out. One afternoon in a sunny window can almost completely dry them out, so be very careful about that. If you have a fluorescent light set up, that's ideal. The fluorescent light should be 3 to 6 inches above the top of the plants, the seedling tops, and you don't need a special agro-light or grow light. All you need is a cool white fluorescent bulb. You only need a special pink agro-light when you want to bring plants into bloom. Once the seedlings get to be about 3 to 4 inches tall and are beginning to look crowded, it's time to transplant them out of these flats into individual containers like this one. And what you need to do is find a fork that's small. A baby fork is ideal, or a salad fork. and you're trying to disturb the roots as little as possible. And when you handle these seedlings, try to handle them by the leaves. Again, these aren't really quite far enough along, but handle them by the leaves rather than the stem. They can lose a leaf, but if you damage the stem, that's usually the end of the plant. And carefully tuck them down in and firmly press them in there. Don't be afraid. There, you want those roots nicely embedded in there. Then water from the bottom. What I do is set them in a tray like this and fill the tray with water, let it sit for an hour until I'm sure that all the water that the plants need has been absorbed, and then empty out the tray. Plants like this, remember we planted nasturtiums in here, will never have to be transplanted. Once they're of sufficient size, they can be planted directly from these containers right into the garden. Now when it's time to plant these little seedlings outside, you need to harden them off. You can't take them from your nice warm kitchen or under their nice warm grow lights and stick them out into our cold southeast spring all at once. You need to acclimate them, do it a little bit at a time, and that means taking them out one day for an hour or two in a shady, quiet, non-windy spot, bringing them back in at night, lengthening the time the next day until within 4 or 5 days they are what we call hardened off and ready to be transplanted into the garden. If you do have a day or a night that you think is going to be frosty, the best thing to do, and they're already in the garden, the best thing to do is take newspaper or Visqueen, cover them, keep the frost off, and usually that's enough to protect them through spring frosts.
This week on Rain Country, we've been skirting around 3 different kinds of southeast home fires. All those responsible for the weekly production of Rain Country will be back again in 7 days to throw a few more communal logs on the fire. I'm Scott Foster. Have a homey week.